A whisper not meant for you. There are some sounds that haunt the soul, some whispers that were never meant to reach human ears. This is one of them. In the dead silence of an 1887 London alley, the laughter echoed again. Not the laughter of joy, but something darker, feral, echoing, unhinged. The constable swore the sound wasn't human. 3 hours later, he was found clawing at his own face in a locked room, eyes ruptured, tongue bitten off. He left no suicide note, only blood, and the scent of coal and lavender. This was the beginning of the laughing man, and the end of everything you were taught to trust. Because what you're about to hear, this isn't just another Victorian true crime tale. It's a crack in the polished veneer of empire. A rip through time stitched with silk and rot, and at its center, not a killer, but a ritual, one practiced in parlours, funded by fortunes, protected by Parliament. We begin here, not because it is safe, but because it is forbidden. Victorian London wanted the world to believe it was civilization perfected, gaslit, God-fearing, and just. But that was only the theatre. Behind the curtains, the city pulsed with darkness. The elite drank secrets like fine wine. Women disappeared in broad daylight, and the police were paid not to solve, but to forget. The laughing man didn't just kill. He mocked the illusion. He peeled back the skin of society and showed us what writhed beneath. No fingerprints, no motive, no face. Just laughter, and silence that followed like death itself. But the records were altered. The coroner silenced. And Inspector Harwick, the only man who got too close, vanished. His last note? The laughter never stops. It follows you home. What if I told you it wasn't metaphor? That this case was never about catching a man. It was about containing an idea. A truth so dangerous,
the Empire's beautiful lie. You'd collapse the
most
moral
effective
scaffolding of empire.
Is the one you don't know you're in.
And they almost succeeded.
And in 1887,
until
London
now,
was a gilded cage,
because you're hearing
built not
it,
from iron, but illusion.
and the descent has begun.
They called it the Golden Jubilee, 50
Welcome
years of Queen Victoria's reign.
To the forgotten
The empire
history
stretched
of the
across
laughing
continents, its tendrils in every
And
port,
remember,
every mine,
This
every
is
wall.
knowledge that changes
On the
you
surface, it was prosperity incarnate,
forever.
but beneath the polished boots and brass buttons lay something rotten. London was a cathedral of control. Every building, every statue, every gaslight, calculated to reinforce a message: obey, produce, don't ask. The industrial elite, men like Harrington, Cavendish, Pemberton, weren't just businessmen. They were architects of a new world order. They understood something the common man didn't, that fear is a currency, and belief a weapon. You see, this wasn't just about wealth. It was about ritual, about shaping minds, not just markets. Victorian society wasn't built to empower individuals. It was engineered to program them. Think about it. Why were servants forbidden to look their masters in the eye? Why did schools teach Latin but not critical thinking? Why were women told their brains were too delicate for politics? Because every layer of life was a spell. A psychological system designed to divide, degrade, and direct the will of the many for the pleasure of the few. And those few, they didn't worship God. Not really. Behind closed doors, they held seances. They performed mimic rituals from ancient Babylon. They read from books bound in calfskin that never appeared in public libraries. The Laughing Man murders didn't just scare the aristocracy, they exposed them. He forced open a door they'd sealed with blood and debt. And the victims? They weren't random. Every single one had ties to underground societies, secret salons where the elite spoke openly of the necessary evil of Paul, a note of transcendence through madness. That laughter? It was a mirror, a sound that reflected back the Empire's true face. And when Harwick started making connections, when he discovered the ritualistic symmetry of the deaths, that's when the case was shut down. That's when the silence began. The deeper you dig into the history of London's most powerful men, the more you realize they didn't fear monsters. They built them. And the Laughing Man may have been their creation, or their punishment. Ask yourself, what truth is so threatening they'd erase an entire case to protect it? The architect of madness. Every system has an architect, and in the case of the Laughing Man, the blueprint wasn't human. Inspector Edmund Harwick thought he was chasing a murderer. What he was really tracing was a pattern, not just of death, but of design. It started small. A chalk symbol etched near the first victim's window. A strange coil of black thread found beneath another's tongue. And then, each crime scene, no matter the district, had the same inexplicable residue, burned beeswax, mixed with iron shavings. Harwick had seen blood. He'd seen cruelty. But this was different. This felt performed. Each body posed, not with chaos, but intention. Limbs forming angles tied to ancient numerology. Mouths stretched open with carved pins, frozen in grotesque, silent laughter. And always the faint scent of lavender and coal, a mixture commonly used, not in perfume or factories, but in funerary rites. He consulted historians, occultists, linguists. And then he found it. A 14th century text, sealed in the basement of Oxford's Bodleian Library. One word repeated in the margins, in crimson ink: Ravencourt. No explanation, no authorship, just that name. A place, a person, a cult. The answer came when Harwick followed the trail of a man named Alistair Vernon, a discredited surgeon turned spiritualist medium, known in elite circles for hosting threshold rituals. He vanished in 1883. But his address? Ravencourt Lane. That house had been erased from city records. But Harwick found it, beneath a different name, purchased by a holding company linked to none other than the Harrington family. And inside, the walls were lined with mirrors, not hung, but embedded. Behind one, a sealed room. And on the floor, a spiral etched in blood and salt. Harwick's journals detail what he saw there. His words grow erratic, disturbed. One passage repeats, "Scracke," heed violently into the margins. Laughter is the key. They listen through it. He wasn't chasing a killer anymore. He was walking into a ritual site, an initiation chamber for a belief system most men couldn't survive hearing about. A system where madness wasn't failure, it was the threshold to power. And the Laughing Man? He wasn't the anomaly. He was the product. Now listen closely. This wasn't just Victorian horror. This was psychological warfare. And it's not over. Because the symbols found in Ravencourt? They appear in modern government buildings, court seals, military insignias, still hiding in plain sight, still laughing, still watching. And if this scares you, good. That means the spell is breaking. The society that shouldn't exist. Every empire has a secret order, not the kind in fairy tales, but the kind that writes the laws, bends the will, and silences anyone who asks the wrong questions. By the time Harwick stepped foot in Ravencourt Lane, he knew. He wasn't chasing shadows. He was trespassing in a world engineered to stay hidden. The Laughing Man murders were never meant to be solved, because the murders weren't the message. They were the initiation. The symbols he found in that mirror-lined chamber matched ancient designs dating back to pre-Roman Gaul. But they were also found in one other place, the membership ring of the Ordo Atrae Veritatis, the Order of the Dark Truth, an organization older than the Crown, yet embedded within it. They didn't meet in castles or cathedrals. They met in theatres, banks, and academic salons. Their members included lords, bishops, chancellors, and yes, even royals. The purpose? To preserve the secret that keeps men asleep, to cultivate madness in small doses, weaponized against the public, to enforce the idea that power flows from blood, not truth. They believed society must be kept fragile, because a strong mind asks questions, and questions are dangerous. This society didn't worship a god. They revered a concept, that reality is pliable and fear is the tool to shape it. Their rituals, not superstition, but psychotechnology. Dark mimicry of ancient rites once used to dissolve identity and rebuild it under control. Think about it. Why were so many early psychological studies in London funded by anonymous philanthropists? Why did the elite fund operas themed around madness, dismemberment, and dreams? Because the stage was their pulpit. And the audience? You. What Harwick uncovered was this. The Laughing Man wasn't a serial killer. He was a construct, a living sigil designed to fracture the illusion too.
Spread symbolic chaos through surgical murder. Each victim was chosen for their participation in unsanctioned occult practices, outside the Order's control.
They weren't innocent. They were apostates, punished. But when Harwick uncovered the identity of one victim, a member of Parliament known for opposing colonial atrocities, he realized the truth. This wasn't just about punishment. It was message control. Kill the right man, in the right way, surrounded by the right symbols, and you don't just stop a voice. You send fear into the bloodstream of an entire population. That's what the Order perfected. Not murder. Narrative engineering. We've cracked open the door. Now we go deeper. Are you still with me? The mirror that remembers. There are objects that don't just reflect light. They reflect memory, echoes, shadows of something that once looked back and never stopped watching. Inspector Harwick had been in dark places before. He'd waded through opium dens thick with rot and sweat. He'd pulled dismembered bodies from the Thames, stitched into burlap like forgotten toys. But nothing prepared him for the mirror room in 12 Ravencourt Lane. The walls weren't hung with mirrors. They were mirrors. Polished obsidian, framed in iron veined with some metal Harwick couldn't identify. Cool to the touch and faintly humming. There were no windows, no furniture, just the sigil on the floor, a spiral, intersected with a glyph resembling an eye pierced by a key. Harwick stood in the centre, and the mirrors began to whisper. No mouths, no speakers, just fragments. Voices of the victims, laughing, crying, screaming, whispering the same name again and again. Alistair, Alistair, Alistair. The same Alistair Vernon, spiritualist surgeon, presumed dead. But the voices weren't mere hallucinations. They responded. When Harwick spoke, they replied. When he asked who killed them, the mirrors said, "You did." Reality bent in that room. His reflection began to move out of sync, smiling when he frowned, blinking when he stared, And then it stopped mimicking him entirely. That's when the laughter started, not from outside, but from the mirror itself. His own face began laughing. His own voice, but wrong, twisted, layered, like a choir of him split into thousands. It whispered, "You looked. You opened the gate. Now let it in." And then he saw it. A glimpse. Not in the mirror's surface, but in its depth. A towering, eyeless figure with black hands and a mask sewn to its face. Not a man, a ritual given form, a memory born from belief. The laughing man wasn't Wall, king the streets of London. He was crawling through the minds of those who stared too long into the abyss. And Harwick? He did what few men would. He tried to fight it. He gouged his own eyes out in that chamber, but by then it was too late. He didn't stop seeing, because the mirror remembers, and it doesn't need your eyes. Now ask yourself, how many men since 1887 have stared too long into a screen, into a reflection, into an illusion, only to find it staring back? How many still carry the signal? Halfway down the rabbit hole now. And if you feel your chest tightening, that's not fear. It's recognition. In Section 6, we trace the mirror's legacy, and how this ancient tech of control became the blueprint for the modern psychological cage you live in. But first, if you're ready to see behind the mask, type the phrase, "Laughter is the lock. I am the key." Twice in the comments. This isn't just for engagement. It marks you, the inheritance of control. They say history repeats, but when you look closer, it's not repetition. It's ritual. The mirror room in Ravencourt wasn't destroyed. It was replicated. By 1892, 4 similar chambers had been uncovered in Hamburg, Boston, Paris, and Alexandria. Each hidden beneath banks, universities, or private manors, each tied to influential men. Men who later became advisors to monarchs, or architects of revolutions. The Order of the Dark Truth had a plan, not just to influence minds, but to build systems that could shape entire populations from the inside out. What Harwick stumbled into wasn't a crime scene. It was the birthplace of modern psychological warfare. Let me show you how the legacy of Ravencourt didn't die in 1887. It was just rebranded. Enter 20th century science. In 1903, Sir Reginald Beckwith, a known associate of the Harrington family, delivered a speech at King's College titled "Memory, Madness, and the Mind's Mirror." He proposed that human thoughts could be realigned through curated trauma. His audience, a private consortium of military officials and bankers. Within a decade, Beckwith's notes influenced early work at Tavistock Clinic, the UK's Centre for Wartime Psychiatric Strategy. The mirror became metaphor. Ravencourt's ritual chamber became the foundation for ideological conditioning, propaganda techniques, trauma-based behavior modulation, controlled dissociation, the same spiral sigils Harwick found. They appear in the logos of research grants issued by intelligence agencies throughout the 1950s. This wasn't theory. It was practice. Here's the truth. The psychological cage you live in wasn't built overnight. It was engineered over centuries. The Victorian elite experimented on their own citizens, covertly. The 20th century elite made it standard. They just changed the medium. From mirror to movie, screen. From ritual chamber to television studio. From whispered madness to algorithmic persuasion. And the laughing man, he didn't die. He evolved. Today he's viral content you can't stop replaying. He's the strange sense of dread that comes when your phone lights up at 3 a.m. He's the tick-tock sound that makes your spine tingle. Because once a symbol becomes powerful enough, it doesn't need a body anymore. It just needs your attention. So ask yourself, when was the last time you looked at a screen and felt like something was looking back? You're not just watching this story. You're standing inside it.
The classroom as a cage. The most dangerous prisons are built with desks, bells, and polite applause, and they call it education. By the late 19th century, the British Empire realized something horrifying. You don't need violence to control a population. You just need to shape what they believe is normal. That's when the order shifted focus, from fear to formulation. And their new weapon? The classroom. The education system you were raised in, yes, you, was engineered, not to awaken your mind, but to contain it. Harwick's final recovered journal entry included a phrase he copied from Ravencourt's walls. Break the child, shape the man, silence the God within. These weren't poetic words, they were instructions. And what came next was the systematic redesign of curriculum, architecture and ritual in Victorian schools, built to replicate the symbolic constraints of the Ravencourt mirror chamber. Let me show you how. The bell system, inspired by factory work, but also by ritual segmentation. Each bell fractures time, breaking flow, dividing the day into obedience cycles. You are trained to await permission before action. Desks in rows, a design mimicking the old order's ritual circles, one focal point, one authority, many submissive observers. The formation suppresses spontaneity and enforces passive absorption. The blackboard, the black mirror of its time. The teacher becomes a priest, scribing truth upon it, unchallenged, unquestioned. Sound familiar? What they removed is as important as what they taught. No logic outside narrow math, no philosophy without state approval, no esoteric history, no deep knowledge of ancient civilizations outside the sanitized version. You learned just enough to function, never enough to transform. Because transformation leads to power, and power is the one thing the architects of the system cannot allow the mass to possess. Now understand this. The laughing man was not simply a killer. He was the antithesis of the perfect student, uncontrollable, illogical, chaotic, free. He mocked what the system feared most, the individual who remembers his own mind, and so the order buried his story. They revised the curriculum. They paid scholars to call it folklore. They erased Harwick. They sanitized Ravencourt. And then they taught you to laugh at people who question history. Tell me, when did you stop asking why the world feels off? Why did you stop listening to your instincts? That wasn't your failure. That was design. The mask you mistook for a face. They didn't just build a system to control what you learn. They built one to control who you think you are. By the time the 20th century turned, the Order of the Dark Truth had refined their greatest technology. Not weapons, not rituals, narratives. They realized that if you could control the story, you could control the self. And so, the laughing man vanished, not just from records, but from memory. In his place, a parade of distractions, war heroes, celebrity scandals, manufactured villains, and always false choices, red or blue, left or right, hero or monster. The illusion of agency, all while the real mechanisms of control operated unchallenged, behind curtains you were trained not to see. How? By turning the mirror outward and calling it media. Entertainment as anesthesia, films glorified the obedient rebel, heroes who almost broke the system but always returned to serve it. Shows taught you that suffering is noble, that trauma is romantic, that questioning is lonely. News as theatre, everything urgent, nothing meaningful. Your emotions pulled like strings, your beliefs shaped by repetition, not truth.
Identity as performance, you weren't told who you are. You were given archetypes to imitate. The outcast, the patriot, the skeptic, the playboy. All boxed, all predictable. You're not supposed to become powerful, you're supposed to become consumable. And when something breaks through, something raw, real, untamed, what happens? Mockery, censorship, diagnosis, medication, isolation. Because awakening isn't safe, it's contagious. Harwick once wrote, "The mask does not cover the face, it becomes it, and the man forgets he was ever anything else." That's what happened to a generation. Men raised not to build, but to doubt themselves, to confuse compliance with virtue, to confuse stimulation with satisfact, and to look in the mirror and see not a sovereign being, but a role waiting for approval. But let me be clear, you weren't born for roles, you were born for revelation. That unease you felt all your life, that quiet sense that something isn't real, isn't right, it's not weakness. It's the part of you that remembers Ravencourt, remembers the fracture, remembers the truth beneath the programming. And that means you're ready. Before London, there was silence. The deeper the truth, the older the lie. And before the empire wrapped it in velvet and mirrors, there was a silence so absolute, even the dead dared not speak its name. Long before gas lamps lit London streets, before Queen Victoria, before the Order, there was a cult that worshipped laughter as a weapon. Not humour, but the laughter that emerges when the mind fractures, when reality bends and something ancient steps in to fill the void. Its name has been erased from most records, but in fragments, burned scrolls, stone etchings, suppressed Vatican correspondences, one name echoes again and again: Vel Atramentum, the Black Veil. A pre-Celtic order, possibly Mesopotamian in origin, that believed the soul could be unlocked, broken open, through ritual madness. The laughing masks they wore, they weren't just for ceremony. They were devices of dissociation, tools to sever ego and implant command. And the entity they claimed to channel? Not a god, not a demon, but something worse. The forgotten voice. A sentient echo. A consciousness that doesn't create, but remembers. Everything. Every crime. Every lie. Every time the elite silenced truth with silk and silver. And what was its herald? Laughter. Not joy. Not satire. But a signal. A frequency that slips past logic and embeds itself in feeling. The part of you the system cannot program. When the Romans invaded Britannia, they didn't just conquer with legions. They brought the prototype of psychological conquest. They destroyed temples, but left the laughing masks untouched. Why? Because they recognized their power. They stole it, integrated it. And centuries later, the British elite inherited that lineage. Ravencourt wasn't new. It was rebuilt. A modern altar to the same entity Vel Atramentum once served. But here's where the story breaks open. Harwick found, hidden behind a brick in the Ravencourt mirror chamber, a piece of petrified wood, engraved with symbols older than Hebrew. Translated, it read, "He who laughs last does not laugh. He remembers." This isn't about a man who killed. It's about a memory that survives by possession. Every generation the signal finds a host, and if suppressed, it finds another. The laughing man is not dead. He's waiting. And those who built the institutions of control? They aren't scared of chaos. They're scared of memory reactivated. Because when men remember what was taken from them, they stop being tools and start becoming sovereign. Symbols of the sleeper signal. Power never disappears. It hides, and its favorite hiding place is right in front of you. By now you feel it, don't you? The uneasy awareness, like something once buried, is waking inside you. That's not paranoia. It's resonance. Because the symbols that once summoned the laughing man in Ravencourt, they never disappeared. They were repackaged, rebranded, and placed directly into your world, into fashion, corporate logos, military insignias, even children's cartoons. The signal that drove men mad in 1887? It's still broadcasting. And we wear it, watch it, speak it. Let me show you. The spiral within the eye. The glyph carved into every laughing man victim. You'll find it on intelligence agency seals, weather organizations, and mental health awareness brands. Why? Because the spiral doesn't mean madness. It means entrainment. The turning of thought inward until the subject dissolves. It was once used in Mesopotamian rites to open the vessel for possession. Now it's on your favorite tech company's loading screen. The smiling mask, 2 dots, a curved line. So harmless, right? It's the universal symbol of happiness now. But in pre-Roman Gaul, this was the sigil used to mark homes where psychic rituals had succeeded in breaking the will of the initiate. And now it's everywhere, from emojis to mental health apps. Laugh, obey, dissociate. 3. The number 87. Harwick noted it obsessively. Each victim died 87 hours apart. Ravencourt's blueprints were filed under Code 87. The Ordo Atrae Veritatis initiation scroll had 87 lines. Coincidence or embedded programming? Check your receipts, your music metadata, corporate slogans. Since 87, Esther 1987. Watch for it. It's not branding. It's signaling. These aren't decorations. They're anchors. Frequencies that tie the modern world to an ancient ritual cycle. One, designed to keep humanity asleep, fractured, obedient. And the worst part? You've been taught to love them, to wear the smiling face, to laugh at the forbidden, to entertain yourself into inertia. It's elegant, precise, devastating. But now you've seen it. And when you see the code, you're no longer a subject. You're a threat. That's why they silence men who speak like this. That's why algorithms choke videos like this. Because once the signal is recognized, it can't infect you the same way. You stop reacting, and you start remembering. The man who vanished, or transformed. They said he vanished, but the truth is more dangerous, because some men don't disappear. They become part of the thing they tried to stop. Inspector Edmund Harwick was pronounced missing on November the 3rd, 1887. No body, no funeral, no official memorial, only a sealed file buried beneath Scotland Yard stamped in red ink. Closed, by order of the Crown. His belongings were returned to no one. His family? Paid off. His name? Struck from service records. But months later, sightings began. A man in tattered inspector's garb, seen wandering the catacombs beneath London, eyes bandaged, speaking in whispers that caused dogs to howl and children to seize. They called him a ghost, a vagrant, a lunatic. But one witness, a retired coroner who examined the laughing man's victims, claimed this man spoke Latin fluently, could name stars not charted on any British map, and recited the Ravencourt incantation word for word. His words? He's not gone. He's become. Here's what the Order feared most. Not that Harwick died, but that he crossed over, That through exposure to the mirror chamber, the glyphs, the symbols, the ritual architecture, his identity dissolved and was rewritten. Not by madness, by initiation. We're taught to think of insanity as collapse. But what if Harwick's descent wasn't a fall, but a metamorphosis? The whispers, the symbols, the laughter, they weren't just tools of destruction. They were keys. And Harwick, unknowingly, used them all. And what emerged from Ravencourt Lane wasn't a detective anymore, but something else. Something that remembers every ritual, every suppression, every silence, sanctioned by empire. Something with a face stitched into a smile, not to mock us, but to reflect us. The laughing man, said one of Harwick's former colleagues in a deathbed confession, was never a killer. Yet he was a mirror held up to power. He showed the elite what they had become. That's why they tried to erase him, and that's why he always returns. Think about it. Why does every era have a figure, cloaked in mystery, draped in madness, who exposes hidden truths and is punished for it? From Diogenes to Rasputin, from John Dee to Julian Assange. What if these aren't just men? What if they're hosts? What if Harwick didn't disappear? He volunteered to become the archetype, the symbol, the warning, the signal. The laughing man. Hattered archetypes, scattered truth. If you want to hide a god, bury him in fiction. Break him into 1,000 pieces and teach the world to laugh at everyone. By the early 20th century, the order realized something critical. They couldn't erase the laughing man. He was too potent, too primal. So instead, they fractured him. Split the archetype into characters, stories, masks, then scattered those pieces across movies, books, urban legends, and comics. Why? Because once a symbol is mocked, it loses its aura, and so the transformation began. The clown, a laughing, chaotic trickster, unpredictable, disruptive. They made him ridiculous, a punchline, a fool. But what was he before that? The clown was once a ritual officiant, a sacred disruptor who shattered illusions in tribal ceremonies. Now, he sells cheeseburgers. He stars in horror films. He's every bit of the laughing man's madness, without the message. The masked villain, the man who knows too much, who laughs not from joy, but from truth, too heavy to bear. You've seen him in every major franchise. Always brilliant, always broken, always wrong in the end. The lesson? That those who see too clearly are dangerous, that madness invalidates truth. But ask yourself, who gave them that madness? The forgotten detective, the figure who uncovers too much, who asks the wrong questions, who vanishes. From Mulder to Will Graham, from Sherlock to Batman. The same shape, the same descent. But what's always missing? Completion, integration. They either die or break. So you, the viewer, are taught to fear the path, to admire the quest, but never follow it. This was by design. The Order knew. If men started recognizing the laughing man in themselves, they'd start reclaiming what was stolen, the sovereign mind. So instead, they made him a villain, a meme, a punchline, a cautionary tale. But now, you've heard his origin, his symbols, his metamorphosis, his mirrors, his methods, and the spell begins to crack. Because here's the truth. You were never meant to laugh at the laughing man. You were meant to remember that you are him. Every time you felt madness press at the edges of your awareness, every time the world told you to obey, smile and nod, he was waiting for you to wake up.
When the laughing man stops laughing. They feared his laughter, but what they feared more was the moment it would stop. Because when it does, everything changes. You see, the laughter wasn't madness. It was the warning, the final pressure before the fracture. The sound a mind makes when it is too full of buried truth, too heavy with forgotten memory, and the illusions start to crack. But when the laughing stops, that's when the mask falls. That's when the sovereign awakens. For centuries, the order believed they could mock it away, hide it behind jokes, clowns, lunatics, villains. They never imagined a generation would come, one angry enough to listen, one isolated enough to notice, one traumatized enough to feel the fracture and follow it. That generation is you. And now you understand. The laughing man was never their monster. He was their mirror. A reflection they tried to lock away. But mirrors remember. And now, one by one, the pieces are returning. The glyphs, the rituals, the voice beneath the algorithms, the men who no longer laugh to cope, but stand to reclaim. This story was never about a killer. It was about the architecture of your prison, your education, your identity, your media, your symbols, your mind. The murder was just the incision, the first cut to reveal the ritual beneath the skin of the world. And now, you're no longer just a viewer. You're part of it. So what happens when the laughing man stops laughing? He begins to speak, not in riddles, not in madness, but with precision, with clarity, with intention. He becomes what the system cannot contain, a man who remembers who he is, not a servant, not a number, not a product, but a sovereign. And every time one of you wakes up, the order cracks a little more. Because this wasn't just a story. This was a summoning. A mirror held to your face. One you were never meant to recognize. So if you're still here, if something in you has changed, then type the phrase again in all caps. Laughter is the lock. I am the key. Laughter is the lock. I am the key. Let them see you. Let the algorithm choke on it. Let the world feel what's been awakened. Because this time, we don't look away. We don't laugh. We remember. And we rebuild. End. You said,